In a recent story I did for AgNet West and Southeast AgNet, we heard from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association on why they are against the Opportunities for Fairness in Farming Act. The OFF Act would make some changes to checkoff organizations. Now, after that aired, I heard from a farmer and organization leader who is in favor of the OFF Act, and I invited her to share her thoughts. So today I'm chatting with Angela Huffman, Vice President of Farm Action Fund. To keep everything clear on what the Act actually says, I'm putting a link to it in this post on our website so you can check it out for yourself. I am also linking to the story with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association so you can hear their side as well. So that is southeastagnet.com or agnetwest.com. I'm Sabrina Halverson. Let's get into this week's AgNet Weekly. Angela, you were responding to a story that I did previously when I spoke with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association about the Opportunities for Fairness in Farming Act. And you wanted to have your side of this heard. And so I wanted to offer you up the opportunity to speak with me and to go ahead and let us know your side, both from your organization and then you as a farmer yourself. To start off, tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, Farm Action Fund is a farmer-led organization fighting corporate control over agriculture and working to build fair competition in rural America.
And are you a farmer yourself?
I am. I raise sheep and chickens, egg-laying hens.
Okay. So tell me, what are your thoughts on the OFF Act?
Sure. Well, first, the OFF Act, there's a lot of misrepresentations out there. One, that it would end the checkoffs. The OFF Act would not end the checkoffs. The purpose is to improve them, make them more efficient, and what it would do is restore transparency and accountability to what amounts to a $1 billion government program.
With the checkoffs in general, what are your thoughts on checkoffs? And also with what you raise, I'm not sure, do you have a checkoff that you pay into?
Yes, so I pay into the lamb checkoff.
Okay.
And our concerns with the checkoff, well, one, we support the concept of the checkoff and the original purpose, which is to do research and promote different agriculture commodities. We think that's extremely important. The problem is, once these programs, they were initially voluntary, which is why they were called checkoff, because the farmer would check a box if they wanted to contribute. And that mechanism alone made them work had more accountability to the farmers staying in, because if the farmers didn't like how they were working, they just simply wouldn't check the box. The programs are now mandatory, and the issue with that is there's no longer any transparency or accountability over how those funds are being spent, who those funds are being contracted to. In the case of the beef checkoff, the vast majority of those funds are contracted to the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, which is the checkoff makes up 70% of their budget, which is, it really brings them a lot of influence and power in Washington, D.C. to claim that they're the voice of America's cattle producers when they're not.
It's a complicated issue. First off, there are so many different commodities involved and different ways that the checkoffs serve their commodities. So you mentioned the fact that the checkoffs are no longer voluntary. If the checkoff was voluntary, do you think that would solve a lot of these issues?
I do think that would go a long way. I do, because the checkoffs would need to work harder to earn farmers' trust so that farmers would opt into the program. However, we're not even asking to go that far. We're simply in advocating for the Opportunities for Fairness in Farming Act, we would simply be asking for more oversight of the programs, more transparency around how those dollars are being spent, better communications to producers, and then a prohibition on checkoff dollars being contracted to organizations that lobby on agriculture policy.
So I hear the word transparency a lot in this interview and then also in previous interviews that I've done both on the OFF Act and on some other things regarding checkoffs. What does transparency mean to you, and what, in more precise terms, what would that look like?
Mm-hmm. So right now, if you were to try to go online and any of the checkoffs. There are 22 different checkoffs, and try to find out who are those funds being contracted to? How are they being spent? There is very, very little information online. Some of the checkoffs give no information at all. Some just give a few line items that are very vague. So what we would be looking for is more detail. Who are all of the entities that are receiving the funds? How are they spending those dollars? And for that information to be readily available to the farmers and ranchers paying into the programs. So that's what that would look like for us.
And that's not currently available to you?
Right.
Okay. And then as far as money toward groups that do lobbying, an example that was given to me recently of something similar would be if I think that soy was used as the example, where soy contracts with another organization to do studies on the health benefits of soybean. And that other organization does have a lobbying branch. So then if the OFF Act were to be passed, would soy then no longer be able to contract for those health studies? Is that how far that reaches as far as not allowing any lobbying?
So that's an issue that I'm really happy to have the opportunity to clear up. The OFF Act would not prohibit the American Lung Association or other health entities from contracting with the checkoff, because the OFF Act has an exemption for organizations. The OFF Act would only apply to organizations that lobby on agriculture policy. So if the American Lung Association is going to the Hill and lobbying on agriculture policy, then they would not be eligible for checkoff dollars. But we don't think that's the case, and we don't think that would be the case with other health organizations out there. And I'll also note there's an exemption for universities and land-grant institutions so that they could continue to do their important research with the checkoff as well. So this would really just be targeting keeping these dollars out of the hands of organizations that lobby on agriculture policy, because we think there's a conflict of interest there. Those organizations should not be receiving that money, building up their influence, building up their brand, and then taking that to the Capitol and working on issues that are contrary to the interests of the farmers that paid into the programs.
So what kind of support are you seeing for the OFF Act? I know the political support, but when you talk to other farmers, are you getting support?
We are. We're seeing a lot of support among farmers. There are so far over 60 farm and ranch organizations that have signed on to endorse the OFF Act, and those groups represent over 200,000 farmers. I think the distinction here really, what we're seeing out there is those supporting the OFF Act are those who are paying into the checkoff. Those opposing the OFF Act are those receiving the checkoff funds who are concerned about showing what they're doing with that money or being banned from receiving that money in the future if they lobby on agriculture policy.
Those are all of the questions that I had, but I wonder, is there anything that I'm missing or any other points that you would like to make and let our listeners know?
No, I appreciate you having me on. I would encourage any listeners who support the OFF Act to contact their members of Congress and urge them to support it as well.
Thank you once again to Angela Huffman, Vice President of Farm Action Fund and a farmer and rancher. Once again, if you want to read the OFF Act for yourself, you can find a link to it on our websites, southeastagnet.com and agnetwest.com. That is this week's AgNet Weekly. I'm Sabrina Halverson. Thank you for tuning in.